Hey there, my friends. Bill McDonald, the reading and writing doctor, here to help you with a poem. The question that the students struggled with for this one was, which sentence best describes the stanzas of the poem? Now, since stanzas is plural and stanza, little group of lines, is singular, it had to be true for all of the stanzas because of the word each, that each means every single one of them. So if something is not true for even one of the stanzas, then you would have to eliminate that because it has to be true for all of them. Let me show you what I mean by sharing my screen with you and looking at a question. This is from the poem that many of you received, and it had a pretty poor results, even though it was a third grade question. I think that fourth, fifth, and sixth grade students need to also pay attention. What is something that is true about each one of these stanzas? So what you have to think about is, if there's only one thing that is true, that one of these sentences below is true, that means that three things have to be false. That if even one stanza makes the statement false, then you have to eliminate that choice. So each, as in every stanza, you can see that repeated. Each stanza contains lines that rhyme. Rhyming words means either the first and third line of the poem rhyme, the second and the fourth, or every line rhymes with the one after it, and then the next two rhyme one of those ideas. So let's take a look just at this above: kernel, bud, tongue, salivating, second. None of those words rhyme based on the last word. So what I would suggest you do is you can use what I use, yellow, to say caution, caution. Let's check and see. Do any of these words rhyme? No. That's repetition. These words don't rhyme with each other because they're just the same word, the same onomatopoeia PS found. That's something coming out of the person's mouth. So I'm going to eliminate letter F. Each, meaning all of stanzas, each stanza creates an image for the reader. Let's check my imagery here. I get to see dialogue. I get to hear someone talking. So things you see and hear and taste and touch is a form of imagery. This stanza, I used a tongue. I get to taste something. Let me see the stanzas before. This stanza, I'm also tasting something and even smelling something. So there's my head and my nose. This stanza, I'm smelling delicious. The aroma, all of that is my sense of smell. Again, here's dialogue. So my imagery, I'm gonna hear something because somebody is saying something. This stanza here, I put fingers because I'm going to be able to touch, the sensation of touch, because that it's hot. My fingers are burning. I can't touch it. So that is the sense of touch. And this one over here, let me see, a loud noise. So I would have a question mark because I always tell kids, think of a question mark as an ear where something's here, somebody's asking something, I need a response. Well, what is the sense? I'm asking you the sense of sound, because they're letting you know that that pop, pop, pop sound, the noise, the explosion, I thought I saw that, let me see. Oh, the explosion was the title. A loud noise, explosions, there it is. So that one is sound, and even the automatopoeia, the popping, is imagery. I get to hear something. So based on the pictures that I drew, it is true that it's creating an imagery for the reader using the senses. Each stanza has a new event. Well, dialogue is not an event. So I'm gonna write letter H here. When people are just talking, a conversation is not a composition. That's just people talking. So the other one that I can use to eliminate, onomatopoeia sounds are not an event. An event is something happening, something taking place in past, present, or future tense. So since 2 paragraphs make that false, I'm going to eliminate letter H. And the last one says each stanza. If it would have said 2 stanzas have repetition, I could have said, okay, yes, that's true, because the first one with onomatopoeia and the last one with dialogue do have repetition, but there's no repetition in the other stanzas. Basically, it's a little mini story written in present tense. I'm pouring it. You can see that the person is writing in first person. They're writing in present tense, things that are happening right now. And the only repetition that I see is on the first stanza and the last one. So that part makes it false. Only 2 stanzas, plural, have repetition. So once I've eliminated my 3 answers, I read it out loud. I underlined certain things. I labeled the imagery. I eliminated 3 answers. The only one that could be true is letter G. I'll select G, place this letter G next to number 2 in my paper if I'm taking a paper test, or I'll write the letter G if the computer allows me to write on the test, which hopefully is going to be allowed, so that my 2G in the book will match my 2G in the Scantron. And now we understand about rhyming, about imagery, about an event. So since this poem is what's called free verse, it's free of meter, that there's no pattern or rhythm that the poem had to follow, and there's no rhyme either. So your kids, as soon as they notice that, should probably write T for title, and explosion is the popcorn in the house. You can zoom in and say, well, it's in the house. You can even zoom in and say, well, 99% of the time, the room that the microwave is in would be in the kitchen. And that's why I have been using my virtual kitchen with my microwave back there as my background for you to be able to imagine being in that room. And so if you're doing this passage with your students, I would recommend that you get some of those packages of popcorn at Dollar Tree, where once the students finish, for motivation, you can tell them, this is just a suggestion, that all those letters of rules that if you read, if you underline, label, eliminate, and select one, if they do all of those strategies, even if they don't get a perfect score, if they show growth, then you can let their stomach grow too by allowing some popcorn to be eaten by your students. And I'm just gonna say, if half of the students didn't understand imagery in third grade, that means that they're probably going into fourth grade not understanding the concept of imagery. And image, I think sometimes we get locked into imagery just means seeing only. I think we need to think of imagery as the senses, the five senses, but I even used, because of speaking, you're going to be able to hear something. And so I would technically call that the six senses, the sense of speaking so that people can hear and listen to what you're saying. So please share or tag your reading teacher friends who are working on rhyming, imagery, repetition, especially if it's intentional, or what was the other choice that was eliminated? Events. There has to be something, either normally poems are going to be written in present tense or past tense. There are some that could be written in future tense about things that have not taken place yet, but I would suggest that you do the pre-read. What's the P, the purpose? What's the poem structure? Does it have R rhyming? Does it have any repetition R? And the E can be the ending. By the time you get to the ending of the poem, is there some sort of message, some sort of theme that you can take away? Because author's purpose, the author's intention in a poem is very hard to infer. Sometimes it's hard to read between the lines, but hopefully by the time your students go from the introduction, the first stanza, the body, and the conclusion, the last stanza, hopefully they'll be able to draw a conclusion about what the author's intention was by the time they get to the end, to know what the purpose was. And there are events, because you could imagine doing all of those things in the kitchen, except for the first one where you just hear sounds, and the last one where you hear someone talking with the word meaning that the popcorn is tasting delicious. I hope that if you do this passage with your students, that they get to eat some popcorn and that they think it's delicious as well. Take care. Have a good evening. Please take time to share or tag somebody in this video.